so much of the work that we do, Jen, is so much more than getting the answer to the question. It's educating the team, it's inspiring the team, it's making sure that the team has checks and balances to stay very grounded and honest to the people that we actually are designing for. It's
All right, Meena, how are you?
I am good, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you so much. I love to start off with something a little fun, and that is what's something about you that people may not know?
I actually meant to ask you a clarifying question about this, but I'm going to go with professional. I'm assuming you
Sure.
wanted professional or was it personal?
I'm open.
You're open. Okay, let's go with professional because it's been very exciting for me, which is I have been a lone woman of color actually for a very long time in this field. So I've had a lot of tenure in this field, and I have really wanted to contribute to increasing the diversity of the population telling the story. Not only, of course, the people who tell the story, but also who's going to collect that data and actually tell the story. And you need to have different listeners. You have to have different people with different backgrounds, different lived realities, different perspectives, attitudes, who need to listen to what it is to be able to then bring that together into something that can be used to inspire. And what I've done is I've started working with charter schools specifically for youth who are Black and Indigenous, or Latinx, I should say properly. And basically, and it has been so much fun. I think the best part of this field is you get to always learn. You always learn. And I am learning more from these students than I have in a long time, which is brilliant. So that might not be something everybody knows about, but
Oh, that's great. Tell me a little bit more about those studies that you're doing with these students.
sure thing. It started actually with a wonderful sponsor at the city of Boston, a gentleman named Yo Deshpande, who just does so much on his own, even in terms of outreach. And he was part of MONIM, which is the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. So that first study was with them. Being the city of Boston, it could be a public study. It was about surveillance technology and understanding how people consume and engage with surveillance technology in the city of Boston. And you can imagine it's a touchy subject for a lot of people of color. It was wonderful to be able to embed it in a moment for kids ranging from like 15 to 20 years old to be able to really think about the agency that they have, how they engage with this surveillance technology, how they might agree or disagree with how it's positioned, how they might ask questions about it. Because at the end of the day, every city does want to connect with their constituents. I do believe that. Some cities do it better than others. And some cities really want to make sure that they are getting all different age ranges where we tend to settle into a particular age range. So in this particular situation, it was a study that started us off, and students were able to start looking into this, not only do an autoethnography, they were also able to go and talk to people in their friends and family circles and collect a little bit of data in order to be able to come back and discuss it. We find topics like this that are basically shareable, if that's a word, and be able to talk about it openly and in a way have them present back where we respect anybody who wants to be anonymous, anybody who doesn't want their name out there, but simply expose them to the process so that they understand that's potentially a career for them to consider if they enjoyed it. So it was
Wow.
great. Like so much fun. So much like students would come up to me and be like, can I do this for like medical? Because I have a particular anxiety or I have a particular this. And I know somebody who's suffering from this. And it was interesting how people came back almost immediately and asked me, is it only for surveillance technology? I'm like, no, that's the start. Many different things.
Absolutely. That's so true. Meena, tell me a little bit more as a woman of color why you were passionate about communicating with others and broadening people's perspectives, perhaps.
Thank you. That's a really good question. It's been a journey for me too. I grew up in Canada. I have always been around people multiculturally, but when I started to get into this field, I noticed it wasn't quite as diverse. But at that moment in time, it was about when you're earlier on in your career, I think you're just there to learn. You don't know if you have the voice to project just yet. But as I started to progress from learning, it's not that the learning ever stopped, but I got to a point where I felt a little bit more confidence in, hey, I actually can speak to something here. I can actually share something, or I now have a number of years of experience. It was important for me to understand that I would always reach back into my head. I'm very visual in my own head. So I feel like I literally go back and I go into my treasure trove of experiences that I've gone through that sometimes shape why somebody would have said something. Like what made them say that? Like what drove them? What drove a participant to actually respond a certain way? And I have found under several circumstances, I'd bring something up and the team around me might be like, that's really interesting. We never thought about it that way. And it doesn't make them good or bad. It just is that their interaction with the world in their life has been different. And I feel like the more variety we can bring to that conversation, the more nuggets we can pull out, the more inspiration we can actually share. And we can learn even more because if I say something that's from my personal, like my past is very fun and exciting and very different, even from somebody who identifies as being East Indian and has grown up in the United States. My personal experience is vastly different from what they would have, even my own children now. It's very different. So, how do we actually tap into that as a superpower that each and every one of us have? Should we choose to be researchers? How can we bring that to the forefront to encourage and to inspire and to excite in different ways? Because to me, that is a lot of what qualitative research is. And it acts as such a wonderful vehicle, present potential, if that's fair to say, to a design team. So
Yeah.
it was very important to me to do
Yeah.
that.
I love that. You think about so many products that are being built in Silicon Valley in a tech bubble without that diverse perspective, and you see the outcomes when the product gets released.
Yes. And beyond the fact that it is just good to have multiple voices always, and there's so much, I want to say obvious good, air quotes that word obvious. But to me, it is actually just so much deeper because it's what we do, right? We look at people and we assume who they are or assume we know so much about them. I love when people surprise me. I don't want to assume anything. I love when I go and I met somebody a few weeks back and they seemingly visually to me would not have known an Indian language and suddenly started asking me where I was from. And I'm like, I'm from Canada. And what do you know any Indian languages? Well, yes, I do. And they started breaking out into a language with me. And again, I had a smile on my face. I didn't go, oh, well, what are you doing speaking this language? Like, it's the excitement of it. Whoa. Yeah, hey, like a Kung Fu Panda moment, like Poe. Like, it's a whoa moment where it's so much fun to hear that somebody's doing something that I didn't expect, which just always makes it very clear to me that I have to keep myself, even as a researcher, with checks and balances to never assume anything. Yeah, it's tons of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned one of my favorite words earlier, which is qualitative research. And I know that's your bread and butter. I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you love qualitative research.
Maybe I'll say why I shouldn't be doing quantitative research is because, wow, I have math challenge, like big time. But I think that qualitative to me has always been fascinating because my way of describing the difference between qualitative and quantitative is in qualitative, you're describing the variety. And in quantitative, you're using volume to describe. Right off the bat, to me, I am not somebody who is quantitative. And the irony is, if somebody knows my personality, I'm very binary in my approach to everything, which should really make me fall into the quantitative side a little bit better. But I love actually living in the abstract when I'm learning about different topics. There's never just one right answer to a question. There is multiple viewpoints, but peeling those viewpoints back and just getting to know you, Jen, why are you the way you are? Like what formed this opinion? What made you love the heat or not love the heat in the city that you live in? What is it about that? Like, you started by saying, I love the heat, but then you're just like, 100 or 4 months is getting a little bit too much. It's those kinds of details that I just love listening to because you have a story and I most definitely want to hear it. So for me, qualitative research has been a wonderful vehicle to be able to get people's eyes lighting up, whether they're telling the story or whether they're consuming the story. It's happy. Because even in situations when it might otherwise not be happy, if somebody's talking about having to take a rheumatoid arthritis injection and have to inject themselves and why it's so difficult, and you feel the pain that they're going through, in that moment, you have hope because you're listening to them and you're listening to that story in order to be able to give them a better solution. So it always ends up hopeful and it always ends up in a way that actually can help describe the variety and also solve for the gaps. So I think that's what has, at a very high level, to me, that's what qualitative research has always been fun. That's the fun of it, that I don't think I could ever leave it, so to speak.
For sure. I'm sure you've heard this. I'm going to make an assumption that you have heard something along the lines of, how can we go with just one or two people's data?
Oh, yeah.
What's the statistical significance of this? How can I make a decision on one little story? What do you say to that?
It happens all the time. So you can assume correctly. It happens all the time. It's one of these moments. I don't know why we like to pin things against each other. It's always a qual versus quant, right? It is not a qual versus quant. It's a qual and quant. They both have their roles. If I say I want to do qualitative data, qualitative analysis and qualitative inquiry, and I only do one or two people, well, you need to have a very clear rationale for why it's one or two people. Are you going contextually very deep? There are times you're visiting sites where it's just one or two sites, or it's 3 or 4 sites, but you're spending the whole day, and the depth of knowledge that you're getting will never be collected if you did a quantity. So in those moments when people start to go after it's just one or two pieces of data, the question is then, wait a minute, are you trying to get a quantitative output from this? Then yes, one or two is not enough. But what we're trying to do is describe the variety. And what you will find is, there's lots of people who've written about this, what you will find is that people will think about this concept of number, and then they'll realize, wait a minute, you don't really have to go after a large number of people. It could be 8 in a given bucket of how you describe your sample. And that's more than enough. You're going to get the depth that you need, and you're going to start hearing repeats. And what it does is you're trying to be able to describe an environment. Sometimes I look at deliverables and people will just say, transparency is important. Transparency is important when you are applying for a job. I'm just making that up. We're looking at evaluating how people apply for jobs to a particular company. How you describe transparency. What does transparency actually mean? You can't just say 8 out of 10 people said transparency is important, because what is the design team going to do with that? They're going to go, great, but I don't know what the attributes of transparency are to the population. I know as a designer what I think transparency means, but is that what they think? And that's what we're trying to do, is break down those elements of variety, because once we get them, then we can go and throw it out to 500,000, whatever our sample size is for a quantitative analysis, and go for it and say, yeah, you know what? You'll find that this many people actually agree with that. But you need that variety and depth, but you can start to question numbers. And it's not to say that we have to always do qualitative first. You can start with quantitative. You can ask what the problem is quantitatively, or even ask what the gaps in knowledge are quantitatively, and then going deep. But the two have to coexist. They cannot be pitted against each other, which that one thing still surprises me, but that is my way of addressing it. And often when people start to hear that there is a method and an approach to those two and why they should be actually brought together as a completely holistic circle, then they get it.
Yeah, I've seen so many times where the choice is one or the other. We're going to go with the quant. We're going to send out a survey. We're going to get numbers behind it so that we can move forward confidently.
The problem is, and I feel bad, honestly, because I know qualitative people are always talking about the fact that, oh, we're never given a chance or we're not given space at the table. I feel equally sad for quantitative because I feel a lot of times quantitative samples and output studies are misused. They're interpreted in some way or fashion or form that suit the story or suit the agenda that's going behind it. It's not as if one suffers less than the other, if that's fair to say. It's that they're both abused in favor of just pushing the deadline without really understanding. That's a very sore topic of late, for sure, for many people. But more and more organizations are becoming so deadline focused that they forget that there is a process to go through, and that process actually does yield good things if it's given a chance. But if we try to do 40 hours of work in 20 hours, or we have $10,000 worth of work and we want to do it in $2,000, you can't. We just have to be very honest about it. You can't. So what are you going to lose? But we never have this conversation of what you're going to lose. We simply just plow forward, literally like bulls in a china shop. And we don't explain, okay, sure, we can do 10,000 for 2,000, but we can't do the same amount of work and effort. Something has to come down. It's a discussion, I think, with qualitative researchers that we have to do better. I have a lot of thoughts around that because I think the education of qualitative research has to be done better. People have to understand how it works and understand how to do a good job of it. And a lot of people think they just pick it up overnight and they start running with it. And I can do a study. It's no big deal. And it's not. So that's also put us back a few steps, if you ask me.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen people who are like, I've seen you do 1,000,000 interviews. I can do one myself. And I'm like, well, good luck. Sometimes good researchers make it look easy. I would love to ask you a little bit more, Meena. What about that, even if they're not strictly a qualitative researcher, it could be a designer who wants to do some research per se, or would they want to do the research to inform their designs or their decisions? What tips do you have to someone to say to their product partner, slow down, give me the opportunity to do this? What kind of education or partnership tips do you have there?
And Jen, I know this. There is a 2x2 that we've put together at twig+fish that has helped us really explain that. And if we think of this 2x2 and one vector specifically is to inform product or to inspire design. And that is our horizontal vector on the 2x2. And if I focused on that alone, that is our way of describing where people who are hybrid kind of folks, so the unicorns, so to speak, of I'm a designer and researcher or researcher and designer in whatever order you like. In those situations, we have them really focus on the product side. Because at the end of the day, if you identify more as a designer, which I don't know as many people who feel they're strong researchers or their primary goal is to conduct research activity and they dabble in design. Like I don't hear that as much. I hear it the other way, which is I'm a designer and I dabble in a little bit of research. But when you are a designer, I firmly believe your goal is to solve. Your goal is to generate solution. That's what your passion is. And you're probably very good at it, or I hope you are. And when we think about designers, then, if we place them on the product side of the fence, so to speak, to inform the product, they really thrive there. So this is talking about how to potentially co-create, do co-creation activities with participants, or potentially doing some sort of evaluation like a usability test. These are natural to a designer because it is all in the moment of solutioning for the product. Where I tend to push designers away a little bit is when we start to think about how to inspire to advance the product, how to inspire so that we start to learn from the humans around us. That's where I ask researchers to really focus. And the reason is your job is to go in and purely listen to the story. You need to be almost expert listeners. By the time you, Jen, as my participants, start to talk and you start to tell me about how you are combating the heat and the heat wave this summer, I'm not already trying to solve for it in my head, and I've actually lost half of your story. I think that's really important to understand, that you have to not only be able to hear the whole story, you also have to have skill in eliciting that story. So it's two sides that I think that's where the super skill of somebody who is in research and is a researcher day in and day out, especially with qualitative research, you need to know how to get the person you're talking to or the people you're talking to unpack that story, to unravel those things they tend not to talk about, to take a moment and almost go, why do I clean my house that way? Like, they need to think about it themselves, because they're not waking up every morning going, I'll tell you why I clean my house this way, Jen. It's not what they're thinking about, right? They're thinking about, gosh, got to get breakfast on the table and then maybe run out the door and catch the bus or whatever it is. We have to be able to place people in that moment without hurrying them to solution. And unfortunately, when I have seen, and I'm sure there are some people out there who feel like they do a brilliant job, but when I do see the hybrids on the side of inspiration, where you're really trying to just generate that story and really understand and unpack these moments that could be really precious for people, I find that they get glossed over. Or somehow, have you thought about this? Have you tried doing this? And suddenly the solutioning starts to come in. And that's where I'm just like, no, you were so close and don't do it. So that's where I feel like that's where the line should be drawn. And I'll even say for the researcher who's embedded in an organization, when they are embedded, a lot of times you are somewhat biased of the organization and the way the organization functions and why certain decisions have been made the way they have. So if you're really trying to break the barriers and think innovatively of coming up with a brand new product, then your goal in that moment is to actually stop and partner with somebody who doesn't drink your Kool-Aid. And that's what an external researcher would really have play, because they have no bias. They have no stake in the game. They're just coming in and listening unabashedly to everything. There's some things that you might have actually closed your ears to because, you know that stakeholder A is never going to accept that.
Yeah, that's true. I can definitely concur with the designer researcher mentality of I'm listening for solutions or things that might inform my solutions or designs. I've seen it done. I've gone into a debrief after a session. Of course, I have the rule, no solutioning here. We're debriefing what they say, and then often they do slip in solutioning when I tell them not to. But they bring up things when they're talking about solutions, or this person said this and they have this problem. And the next step is, and our product can do this for them, or we should design this. I'm never even thinking about those things. I come out of an interview, like you said, focusing on all the little things that they said. Wow, can you believe they clean their house because it's Tuesday and that's when their mother always cleaned the house? Little details like that. And they're already thinking, I need to put a notification in the app to let them know it's Tuesday to clean. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And
it's dwelling in that story a little bit as well. If I suddenly, in the middle of this conversation, said, and by the way, I didn't tell you, Jen, I actually want to ask you about how you invest your extra money that you have at the end of every month. How do you actually invest it? And you're just going to be like, oh, and you got to stop and you're going to probably think about it. And then if you give me an answer, it might be the answer. And when people say people just give you like an answer to please you, it's not about pleasing you. They just want to answer the question and feel like they're actually capable at a moment, and also servicing the need of being a participant in answering your question. But nobody goes in to say, I'm going to give a completely shoddy response to Jen today because that's what I want to do. Nobody goes in with that intent. So it's important to get people to take a moment to unravel that reality. But it's equally important for the people listening to almost take 2x the amount of time to process that, to go through it and to think about what all Jen just told me about. Wow, so her mother cleaned on Tuesday. Like, that's really interesting. Is it attached to habit? Is it attached to nostalgia? What are we talking about here? Does she clean the same way as her mother? Or maybe doesn't clean anymore because she is trapped in a house where it was so clean. She doesn't want to feel like there's something much greater that we need to understand. Because when we think about these four ways of describing, human existence, where we have behaviors, we have aptitudes, we have attitudes and emotions, our behaviors and our aptitudes change very rapidly, but our attitudes and emotions are a bit more long lasting. So we want to go after that data, but yet, if I'm a designer, and again, nothing against my designer friends, your focus is to act. Your focus is to solution. So you want to know what somebody's doing in that moment. How they're thinking about something, what their perceptions are toward it might not be as important because you don't feel it services your solution, but it actually does for a much greater, longer time if we can give it just a little bit of time to percolate.
How do you recommend getting your team to percolate on those things a little bit longer?
Great question. So something that we do, and this comes down to process, this comes down to practice, is when we actually start out, and again, we are an external consultancy, and I teach at Bentley University. I tell my students the same thing, whether they're internal or external to a company. When you start, the goal is to make sure that people understand the entire arc of your qualitative research study. So it's not to say that just give me your questions, then I'm going to run away, and then, hey, join us on this day and you can listen in. It's to tell them at every step, this is how we're going to work together, because it's not for one researcher or two researchers, even to just listen and to disseminate that information to the team. It's for the team to immerse themselves in that listening. And it's not to say it has to be in context, whatever form it's taking, whether it's in context, in person, remote, they have to be listening. They have to be fully present. And I use that word very intentionally, but they have to be fully present to listen to what this person is telling us about how they're cleaning their house, if we take that example. And we set that timeline from the beginning of our studies, and we give very specific dates and very specific tasks. This is when you are going to have to be present. This is when you do not have to be present. In fact, go away. And it's very important for them to understand that they are not bearing the burden of that process. They're simply being shepherded through it. So when we tell them we give them an orientation. This is our protocol now. We would have collaboratively constructed that protocol. Here's the protocol. Here's your orientation. As an observer, as a listener, this is what you're going to do. Here's how you're going to take notes. Here's where you're going to take notes. Here's what we're going to do after every session. We're going to debrief. So if the session, let's pretend, is an hour long, their calendar invite will be for 90 minutes because they have to be there for the debrief. And it's time that we ask for even before we start recruiting. So way up front. And it's to give them that expectation that there is structure to the process. There is intention in how we do our work so that they're like, okay, I get it. So then we do this. And then if we all have a moment where we can percolate, you are responsible for your own notes, Jen. You have to take your own notes and you're going to look through them. And then once we've finished all of our data gathering and our little mini debrief, we are then going to go into a phase of analysis where we have a raw data workshop. We simply talk about the data, talk about things that are interesting. It is highly facilitated. So it's not to say that it's a free-for-all, but it is intentional because let's say I'm making this up. You have 16 participants. We are going to go through every participant in a way that helps us hear. What did Jen feel she heard? What did so-and-so feel they heard? Who else heard something? And then suddenly somebody goes, wow, Jen, you heard that? I never heard that. Or wow, Meena, you said this and I didn't know where you got that follow-up question from. Can you help me understand? Oh, good question. But it gives the team the permission to not jump to conclusions, but to simply discuss. Because to me, that is, in my world and the way we function as an organization, is that's where the magic actually happens. I always use the analogy of a tree, right? You're climbing a tree. You want to get to the top of the tree. The top of the tree is your presentation. But if I take somebody and airlift them to the top of the tree, if they look down, they're never going to understand why certain branches were avoided, why certain branches were leveraged. But if you are part of that moment where you're talking about things very organically and you're climbing the tree and you go up a branch that we almost got to the top, but the branch got really weak, then you're going to come back down and go to the right and go to a different branch. If you are part of that, you will be less quizzical or challenging of what you hear in the final presentation, because to you it makes sense how that all came about. And it doesn't have to be incredibly time consuming either. Some people will think, great, I don't have hours in the day, Meena. You don't need hours in the day. But if a process is put together with little bits and bytes all along the way, where those breadcrumbs are dropped, we don't lose people.
Right. So you're saying have your partner not only observe the interviews, but participate in the analysis as well?
They have to, because at the end of the day, we are definitely experts in what we do. We're very confident of it. But we don't know the domain. We don't know the background as well as you do. But what we're doing is helping you bring structure to how you get answers to your questions, because you and I have spoken about this at length. Research is just the act of getting answers to questions. That's really what it is at the very basic level. So let's not scare people with this word research, but when you have a question and you want an answer, nobody says, just give me an answer. I don't care. People want a high confidence answer. They want an answer that they can build on. They want an answer that gives them strength to be able to move forward, or inspiration, or something that gives them that internal or intrinsic confidence to say, this feels right. This feels great. And it's not just one person who should feel that. It needs to be an aligned moment. That alignment is imperative.
So what do you do when your product partners or whoever say, you just go do the research, I'm really busy, just come back and give me the results?
We tell them we can do that. We always can. However, we don't advocate for it, and this is why. For those reasons that I just said, it is important for them to be there. It's important for them to listen. It's important for them to learn and be able to accurately leverage and extract those stories when they need to be extracted, but in a way that is socially responsible. Like, socializing that data also has to be responsible. You can't add your own bias. You can't add that guy didn't know what he was talking about, so just forget about that, because people tend to do that so often. Oh, did you remember the weird guy who was like, that's how they start to describe the participants. So we will caution them on that, because that's the language that will circulate then. So much of the work that we do, Jen, is so much more than getting the answer to the question. It's educating the team. It's inspiring the team. It's making sure that the team has checks and balances to stay very grounded and honest to the people that we actually are designing for, and for those that we have yet to design for as well. So we are very clear upfront saying, if you're not there, when we leave, a lot of those stories leave with us then, which is unfortunate, and you don't want that. And I have to be honest with you, I think this is probably the benefit of being external to organizations. When they bring us in, we often have a lot more involvement. We often have people say, well, we're definitely going to be there with you because you're doing the work. And clearly, obviously, they're paying us for the work, so they want to make sure that it's being done properly. So very rarely do we have people say, just run away. Or if they do, then we have a chat about it, or we find other ways, because we're not also dogmatic. We're like, you have to be there. We can also, if it's a recording, listen to the recording, join us back when it's time, so that you can actually be ready. So we might not have those in-between session debriefs, but they can still join us for the raw data workshop.
Yeah, I know I've struggled through many years of just the show up and throw up. You go do the research, I'll go to sessions, I'll do the debrief, but I've always done the analysis by myself. So I've been hearing more either group synthesis, analysis, and group recommendation building, and not the researcher coming with recommendations.
Absolutely. Because it's also really exhausting. You do this work. Research is exhausting work. Any aspect of research, any of the activities that you do, it consumes a lot of your mental power. If you are now tasked with looking at all this data, you are again back to wanting more diversity in the field. You're then literally focused on your way of doing things. If it was just me, I'm going to do it the same way. And all I need is for my colleague Zarla to jump in and be like, I didn't look at it that way. And she'll come up with a brilliant, oh my God, nobody does analysis as beautifully as Zarla does. But literally, she'll come up with something. I'll be like, walk me through this. I didn't think of it. And that's just the two of us. Then we have our clients who'll be like, it's really interesting. We were talking about this yesterday and I brought up this framework that we've used before, blah, blah, blah. Now they have knowledge that they can pull from the company because this is all they live and breathe. So when they bring that additional, it brings even more meaning to the data. That becomes even more exciting then. So you realize that the power is for all of us to come together and to actually look at that data because you can make so much more sense of it. Again, it cannot be a free-for-all. It has to be highly facilitated. This is where you want to do it with somebody who's done it often enough and is comfortable in doing that. And there will be uncomfortable moments. Like a lot of times when I think of either the people that I've interacted with or the students in class, a very common question is, what do I do if I don't have the answer to something? Great, good for you. There's nothing to be nervous about. If somebody goes, Meena, did we get this question answered? I don't really think we did. It's not a failure of any sort. It means that now we know that question has to be answered because of this discussion we're having. So it's always placing it in terms of it's a journey. The journey is what's really important. It's actually not even the destination, to be honest with you. It's the adventure along the way. That's what we need to really unpack and understand. And that's where, like I said, the magic happens. It always does.
Yeah, I know. I feel that magic feeling when I'm in these interviews and I'm like, oh, wow, I can't believe that was said. That's totally awesome. Never thought about that. And I feel lonely sometimes that other people didn't hear that as well.
Yeah. So we will not do research in a way that is just like the two of us. To us, that starts to actually devalue. You're not getting your full value of what you're setting out to do. If you're really putting in the effort to do this, then take it seriously and be a part of the effort. That's your responsibility in this moment. That's the importance of you stepping into this moment and saying, I'm going to listen. And we might, like I said, there's always ways. You can always hear the recording, or it might be a proxy, but proxies are not good either, because then I'm getting Jen's version of a session or Meena's version of it. And that's not what you want. You want everybody to think for themselves. Again, back to the reason why that we all have stuff behind us that forms the way we look things forward.
For sure. Want to wrap up today, Meena, with what do you wish that people knew about user experience or user experience research that they just don't get?
That is a really good question, because I think people get it. I think people see the value. So I know I have said things in the past where I have definitely received backlash from people. Like there's designers and researchers. And again, I've told you where I place these people who are design researchers in the middle. Also feel like we need to start realizing that rushing towards these deadlines, rushing towards these low-cost studies, and there's nothing wrong with low-cost studies, using AI where it needs to be used. No issue. There are places that you can responsibly use it so long as you govern what comes out of it. You also have to be careful, and I always say this out loud, you have to be careful in putting any of that data into an AI engine, because confidentially, where does that data go? So we have to be careful about these things. But what I think people just have to realize is the emotional aspect of being human is never going to leave us. We're never going to stop being emotional creatures. So trying to remove the emotion, so to speak, from anything is really futile. Why? Why do that? Even though people say, oh, I really want this to be just wonderful. I want this to be fantastic for people. But then are you really? And yes, it comes down to having a job. Some people say, Meena, you can say that because you're external, but we're internal. But the question is, it starts with a simple question. Where are we getting this confidence in our knowledge from? How do we keep connected with people? Does it matter that we create connection with our constituents, or do we not care? If you don't care, that's great. But if you do care, which is what most people tend to want to say, then how are you actually showing that you care? There's countless. I'll give you an example. I'm sorry, I'm going to call it companies here. I bought something from Walmart because my daughter is moving off campus into a house. So I buy something from Walmart and I have Walmart Plus and they come and they deliver it, except my neighbor's outside when the delivery driver drops it off. I'm inside working. The driver literally runs almost halfway on my lawn to do a U-turn because they're too, I don't know, lazy to turn into my driveway. And ran over my sprinkler heads. Problem starts, right? The problem has begun. But when I get in touch with Walmart and I say, hey, this is what you're done, immediately they sent me a video, everything. So I had the tracks on the lawn. I don't know why my neighbor was out. She was just like, hey, listen, really astute for her to just pull out her phone and start going at it. But Walmart said, oh, we're so sorry. That's a third-party company and you'll have to get in touch with them. I'm thinking to myself, really? This is Walmart delivering to my house. But they are happy to silo as quickly as possible because that's not my problem. How does that actually delight me as a customer? And yet, what do they say when you buy Walmart Plus? We'll delight you as a customer. We will make this so wonderful. 2-day shipping, because obviously they're competing with Amazon. I understand that. But it's small things like this that nobody needs to be taught. That makes no sense. If I turn the table, let's pretend you work for Walmart, and now this happens to you because, I don't know, Target did this to you. How are you going to feel? Are you going to feel elated? No, you're going to feel the same frustration that I did. I had to get my guy out. He had to check sprinkler heads. He had to change the sprinkler heads. I'm thinking to myself, all this for a wall delivery that I needed for an instant pot? Give me a break. So it starts to put, but it's frustration. These are things we can easily alleviate with just a little bit of focus on that emotion. And I wish people would know that about the fact that is central to what the work we do. It's not just making things easier. It's really connecting emotionally. And that is never going to go away. It doesn't matter what we say. That's going to be there. So why ignore it? Why keep on suppressing it when all you have to do is nurture it? Because you do know if you treat somebody nicely, they'll be your friend for life. Unless you really botch up something. So
Relate to that story so much. It's somebody says showing their corporate underpants, those silos. We don't care a third company's delivering that. I care that you ran up for my sprinkler head. I don't care who that was.
I have to tell you, it's amazing that people are comfortable. And I've had that happen several times. I've literally in the last year had it happen several times. And typically I would go at it and say, listen, this doesn't make any sense. Then why am I even buying with you? So are you saying next time I should be prepared to spend another $200 on changing sprinkler heads if I want to buy an Instant Pot from you? I don't think I go in thinking that way, right?
Right.
And yes, it's not the norm, but at the same token, they need to take responsibility because it is part of their journey. It is part of their experience. It's their brand that has taken the hit. I don't know who was driving the vehicle and whether they have their independent business. That doesn't matter to me. These moments, there's several moments like in college and where we focus so much on the human, and even this is so emotionally focused on the human. Then you ask yourself, if you go broader, are we actually even focusing on the right thing? Because you have the humans at the center of everything nowadays, but are we really at the center of everything? We have to think about how the climate is going to affect it. The environment's going to get affected with where our designs are. Is it sustainable? I think this concept of qualitative research and who a user researcher is, there's going to slowly be a team of researchers that have to be there. There has to be people who are sustainability experts. There has to be people who are, I don't know, biodegradable experts. Like, we're thinking about this material. Is it actually going to melt into the ground or not? Like, we need to start thinking bigger because all we're doing is coming up with very uninspired decisions to things, uninspired solutions. It's a harsh statement. I feel like we're losing our curiosity. I feel like we're losing a little bit of that excitement. People are very uninspired. I'm an absolute Instagram junkie. And there's this one company, this one feed, I should say, that I follow, and they were talking about the 6-pack rings that you get around a beer. If you're getting a 6-pack, those rings end up in the ocean. And of course, animals stick their heads through it and suffocates them,
Yeah.
and it's really sad. This company in Europe has come up with these rings now that literally are food for the animals. And you're just like, well, isn't that lovely? I
Yeah.
can enjoy my beer while I'm feeding an animal as well. Hooray, because you know it's going to end up somewhere in the ocean. It's not impossible for us to push these boundaries, but we need to want to. And if I knew that I wanted that beer and I had to pay, I don't know, I'm just making this up, 5 cents more for that packaging, knowing that I'm feeding an animal and then I'm getting to enjoy my beer, rock on. I'd be so happy. So again, we have to think of these things. I feel like there has to be some change in the way we're looking at how we do our work, because I feel we're so simply focused on convincing the stakeholders, and it's so tactical that we're actually missing the larger picture that we can do so much better.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I love that. Thank you for ending on that magical note. It was awesome. And thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's so appreciated. It's been a pleasure. And I thank you for inviting me on. I'm really honored.
Oh, of course. Honor is all mine.